Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. With each step, I made sure my feet pointed straight ahead, my hips swaying gently. My elbows were tucked in slightly, wrists out, and hands hanging loosely at the ends of my arms. I had practiced extensively to perfect moving like a woman. Click, click. My heels struck the concrete sidewalk rhythmically on some stones. I quickly learned to be careful of cracks in the pavement where heels could get caught. After just a few steps, I discovered this when one of my shoes snagged and came off my foot. It did no harm, it just startled me and made me more aware. As I walked to the shops, a few other passers-by, mostly older men and women of both genders, smiled at me, and I smiled back. Few of the younger people were women, mostly with young children in strollers. As we passed, they quickly glanced at me and smiled. It was slightly unnerving because I didn't know if they were smiling because they knew or if it was just that all women smiled at each other. The walk to the shops took longer than I expected, partly due to the short, slow steps necessitated by the tight skirt and high heels. This was my first journey taking much longer than planned. What the heck? Why does it matter? Enjoy it, I told myself, remembering that I needed to be home by no later than 4:30, which is when I might expect the first of my neighbors to return. Oh my God, I wish I could celebrate this moment properly right now. When I reached the end of Clifton's short main street, I was a little surprised by how many shoppers crowded the narrow sidewalks, which made me feel a bit scared and uneasy. At the same time, I felt like I had just about reached my limit of adventure for now. I still had 2 more days, so there was plenty of time to explore. Just as I decided to turn around and head back home, a large group of rowdy students approached from behind. I began to move forward in fear, hoping they would go further down the street rather than having to pass them. I crossed the street and continued walking, a little frightened by their presence, but trying to calm down and blend into the scenery as they passed by. I did only a bit of window shopping as I was stressed and now a little uneasy after encountering the students. Now I wished only to get back home to safety. It took me about 10 minutes to cross the main street again and begin my walk back, feeling more and more at ease knowing I was heading home. I hadn't expected that the stress of dressing up and going out would be so intense. I was back on my street and on my way home in a few minutes. Almost immediately, I started to feel calmer, and the earlier enjoyment began to return. I was on my way home for a well-deserved personal celebration. A rough male voice shouted from a short distance away. I looked around in shock to see who was yelling, but there was no one. Oh my God, I could now see them. They were all looking at me and making gestures. Could everyone see I was a boy dressed as a girl? I was now engulfed in extreme shame and starting to sweat profusely from stress. I felt so embarrassed and horrible. I had to get away. The turnoff for a different street that led diagonally away from my tormentors was right there. This meant I had to walk around the block to get home, but it was preferable to enduring those rough builders' jeers. As I walked along the sidewalk to the next intersection, my pace slowed by the high heels, but I kept trying to tell myself to stay calm, knowing that panicking wouldn't help in the current situation. How did they know? What gave me away? What did I do wrong? As I continued along the tree-lined sidewalk, these questions tormented me. I felt crushed, and above all, I just wanted to shed these clothes and go home. The signs of femininity, the skirt and high-heeled shoes that had once excited me now only brought fear with every click of the heels. Why had everything gone so wrong? I looked great in the mirror. It was perfect for daytime. Where did I go wrong? As I turned another corner, I began walking down yet another street lined with large, quiet houses and mansions. Occasionally, a car passed by, but I paid them little mind. I needed to get home. I gradually became aware that the way I was walking was changing. With each step, the pain in my feet intensified until it became almost unbearable, and my toes started to give way and lose their support, spreading the feet apart. "Oh no, I shouldn't have worn such thin, high heels," I lamented. Now, walking slowly and painfully, and when the pain became too much, I had to stop and lean against a wall for support while I tried to give my sore feet and toes a break. It was becoming imperative to sit down and take off these cursed high heels. There was still a long way to go, and it seemed nearly impossible that I would make it home on these painful feet. After taking a short break against the wall, I continued on my painful journey, fueled by the fresh memory of the abuse I had just endured at the builder's hands. It seemed like I was trying to maintain a normal female gait, but the pain caused by the high heels was excruciating. When I finally reached the last intersection and the homeward leg was now in sight at the T-junction, I saw a wooden bench seat set back from the road near a bus stop sign. Crossing the road was slow and painful. Every tiny stone felt like burning cinders of my feet. When I finally reached the bench, I was relieved to sit and be off my feet, not even caring about anyone or anything else at that moment. But after a while, as the pain subsided, I began to slowly regain my composure and became aware of my surroundings. There were no people around, except for the occasional passing car or truck, as it was lunchtime and few were nearby. I removed one shoe and massaged the toes, then reluctantly put it back on and repeated the process with the other foot. It felt so good that I continued massaging each foot in turn for about 30 minutes, unable or unwilling to endure any more pain. How do women walk around in heels all day? I wondered. While resting, a few people passed by, but they didn't pay much attention, just the occasional glance. When anyone approached, I would straighten my back, slip on the shoe, and ensure my knees were pressed together, trying to look as if I were just preparing for the bus. As I rested, the sun slowly dipped behind thick, dark clouds, and the temperature dropped, becoming uncomfortably cold. I could feel the cool air through my nylon socks chilling me. It also became clear that it was going to rain soon, and it was time for me to start moving toward home. It was painful to get up, but I was relieved to be standing, knowing my ordeal was almost over. After 15 minutes, I finally reached the small iron gate to the front yard, pushed it wide open, and quickly walked up to the small front porch. I momentarily forgot the pain in my feet, relieved to have reached safety. I reached the big, black-polished wooden door and felt a sense of salvation as I leaned back against it for support. I was weak in the knees and glad to be home. Then I took off the shoulder bag and began to search inside for the front door keys. To my dismay, I realized there were no keys in the bag as I felt around. "It's not possible," I exclaimed aloud. I was sure I had checked, putting them in the bag before leaving the flat. Panic set in as I checked the bag again, this time searching the entire inner space more thoroughly, but still no keys were found. I quickly examined every part of the bag and its contents, but each search turned up the same result. No keys. No keys. I was in disbelief. Shocked, I let the shoulder bag fall to my side, feeling increasingly hopeless, still not believing what was happening. Yet, gradually, the reality of my situation became all too apparent. Where did the keys go? Where could I have put them? I was sure I had placed them in the bag. Then, with a sudden rush of hope, I did a quick check of all the jacket pockets. Nothing! What a disaster! What am I going to do? I remembered the bag falling off the bed and its contents spilling out while I was looking for a pen and notepad to take down my mom's contact information. It's possible that the keys fell out of the bag at that time, and I missed them when I repacked it. As I leaned against the door, more than a little scared about my predicament, I desperately tried to figure out what to do next. What's next for me? How do I get out of this mess? I realized I couldn't stand in the hallway much longer as my feet were starting to hurt, and I didn't want the neighbors to notice me. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Then I remembered the hallway that connected the front of the house to the backyard and sheds, which also served as the main entrance to the basement apartment. There was a covered area under the ground floor apartment, partially hidden by overgrown bushes where I could temporarily hide without drawing too much attention to myself. With a heavy heart, I walked along the short garden path and shakily descended the few uneven, damp stone steps into the dimly lit tunnel. After a moment of adjusting to the darkness, I glanced around and noticed the front door of the basement apartment, its white paint peeling and glass panels looking dirty. The door was locked, of course, so I tried the handle out of sheer desperation, but as expected, it didn't budge. I walked away and looked for a place to rest my aching feet. Eventually, I found a spot to sit, contemplating taking off my shoes for a moment, but the ground was too wet and dirty. The passageway was a small, dark space with damp, mossy stone tiles. The air was thick with the smell of mold and dirt. Glancing at my gold watch, I was shocked to see that it was already past 2 p.m. Where had the time gone? I tried to think through my options and what my best course of action might be, but none of them seemed very good. It dawned on me that I would have to seek help from a neighbor. I couldn't hide in the passageway until Mom returned. Even if I could, I couldn't explain why I was dressed in one of her favorite outfits and a business suit. Plus, I would be in terrible shape after a few days. The thought of this option wasn't pleasant. The residents of the ground floor apartment usually returned from work around 5, but there were still a couple of hours to go. I briefly considered asking them for help, but the thought of standing in front of them like this was too embarrassing to contemplate. I wasn't keen on approaching the architect either, as he usually returned late at night. That left only the young nurse. The few times I had met her, she seemed kind. I thought she might not ridicule me or keep bringing it up if she saw me dressed as a woman. The more I thought about it, the more appealing the idea of asking her for help became. I was fairly confident she would keep my secret better than anyone else in the building. But what about her boyfriend? Would she tell him? Worse yet, he might be home and see me. I weighed my options and decided that the nurse was the only real choice I had, and the best person to ask for help. But where was she? Depending on her shift, she might be gone all afternoon or even all night. In any case, I had to catch her alone as she came or went from the building because I didn't want her boyfriend to see me. Just like the ground floor residents and the architect, I was certain he would never forget this day. The rain began to drizzle steadily, turning into a downpour, and I started feeling quite cold. I pulled the jacket tighter around me, more miserable than I had felt in a long time. The cold air on my stockinged legs no longer felt adventurous. It was just chilling. After checking my watch again, I realized it was now 3:30, and I had been sitting in the dark, cold, damp space for over an hour. The shoe was hurting my toes considerably, but at least my knees felt somewhat better. How do women manage in high heels? I wondered again, distractedly. Getting up, I hesitated at the entrance to the passageway, peering out at the pouring rain, preparing myself for what I had to do next. Then, bracing myself, I ran up the short set of stone steps and around to the front porch, my shoes splashing in small puddles that had formed on the pavement. When I reached the front door, panting and more excited than tired, the porch provided brief respite from the rain, but I could feel droplets of water on the back of my legs, and my feet were soaked. My outfit was damp from the rain. In a moment of excitement, I reached out and pressed the nurse's front door intercom call button. I waited for a response, tense and expectant. A few cars moved slowly down the street, splashing water as they passed. After waiting a few minutes without any sign of response, I pressed the call button again, holding it down a bit longer this time, hoping someone was home. Again, there was silence, and the speaker remained quiet. Disheartened, I turned away from the door and slowly descended the front steps, feeling defeated and hopeless. The rain didn't matter to me anymore. I had resigned myself to the fact that I had no choice but to ask one of my neighbors for help, even if it meant facing their ridicule and shame. I was such a fool! Hey there. Hey, who's that? A woman's voice suddenly came from the radio speaker. I nearly tripped over my high heels as I ran back up the 3 steps. Hello, my name is Ia. I live on the first floor. I'm so sorry to bother you, but could you please let me in? I can't find my front door keys, I said, out of breath. Okay. The automatic buzzer sounded and the door swung open. Is it you? The nurse inquired. Thank you, I called out as I stepped through the opening and into the safe hallway. I felt an immense sense of relief as I closed the big black lacquered wooden door behind me. Thank you so much. As I stood with my back against the door, I slipped off my high heels. For a brief moment, I couldn't move, my numb toes aching terribly as they were freed from the tight shoes. It was both unbearable and a relief. I held my breath and strained to hear any noise that might indicate whether the nurse was coming to check on me. But there was nothing but pure, blissful silence. Thank God I'd made it this far without being seen. Slipping off my socks and carrying my shoes, I cautiously climbed the stairs to my apartment door. The initial relief faded as I faced the next challenge, getting past this locked door. I had at least managed to sneak into the hallway unseen, which was a small victory. There was no need for the painful high heels since the hall was dry and warm. If necessary, I could hide for a while under the stairs. Pushing against the door with all my might, the Yale lock remained firmly in place. Suddenly, the silence in the hall was broken when the door to the nurse's apartment opened. Footsteps could be heard on the landing above, followed by the faint sound of a door closing. Paralyzed with fear and panic, I froze. There was nowhere to hide and not enough time to dash down the stairs to the dark space underneath without being seen. Rooted to the spot, unable to think or move, I was certain I'd been caught. The need to use the bathroom surged through me. My heart raced and my knees went weak. I closed my eyes, unable to face the impending exposure. Oh my God, I was so close to being free from this female disguise. Then I heard it, the faint ringing of a phone. The nurse paused her descent, and I silently prayed it was her phone. She retreated back the way she came, and I heard the rustling of keys and the opening of her door as she re-entered her apartment. Wasting no more time and deeply grateful to the mysterious caller for the unexpected rescue, I hurried down the stairs, nearly slipping a few times on my nylon-covered feet. Just as I reached the safety of the dark space under the stairs, I heard the nurse shut her front door and begin descending again. In the dark under the stairs, I tried to steady my breathing, focusing on each breath as I watched the nurse pass by. She descended the stairs slowly and noisily, pausing momentarily at the bottom. My heart was in my throat. I watched her open her mailbox, remove a couple of letters, then slam the mailbox door shut and disappear momentarily. She opened the front door, and then she was gone, leaving me alone in the quiet. The soft sigh and click of the lock marked the end of the big door closing. The day's events had utterly shattered my emotions, and I stood there trembling and unable to move. That was too close. After what seemed like an eternity but was only a few minutes, I ventured back up the stairs and tried my door again to no avail. I checked my watch and saw it was now 4 o'clock. The first of my neighbors might start returning in an hour or even less if some decided to come home early. Something had to be done. Then, in frustration, I attempted a half-hearted karate kick at the door, but my skirt restricted my movement. It would be bad enough to be caught dressed as a woman, but even worse to be caught in a compromising position. Another idea came to mind. Leaning against the door in anger, I prayed for a miracle, promising to whoever was listening in the heavens that I would never, ever dress up again. I knew exactly what I should have done differently. As I pressed my back against the door, I felt a very slight give. I leaned with all my weight and swayed a bit. A faint sound of dry wood cracking could be heard. The door had moved a little more. I stepped back and tried the maneuver again, this time using all the force I could muster. That noise was unmistakably the sound of wood yielding under pressure. I braced myself and slammed my shoulder against the door once more with all my strength. The door suddenly burst open, sending me tumbling to the floor. My high heels and shoulder bag flew off, and my skirt slid up my thighs as my legs flailed in the air. I lay there for a moment, absorbing the shock of what had just happened and reveling in the fact that I was finally home. I was in, but my shoulder hurt terribly and was definitely bruised. The door frame was also damaged. I was finally safe, though. I wasn't sure how I would explain the damage to my mom, but at that point, it didn't matter. I got up, closed the door, and let the automatic door spring hold it shut. Then I bent down and picked up some of the larger wooden splinters that could snag my tights. It took me a few minutes to gather the debris and place a small pile on the hall table. Then I went into my mom's room, knelt down next to the 4-poster bed, and looked underneath. There they were, lying on the floor, their steel edges gleaming, the keys. Picking them up, I thought about how these simple but crucial items had almost led to a complete disaster in front of my neighbors. I went back to the front door and locked it with the mortise lock this time, not caring about the broken door frame. It could wait. I walked into the living room, turned around, and slumped into an easy chair. I began to feel calm and to enjoy the sensation of my female clothes once again, now that I was back in the safety of my flat after everything that had transpired. It was a shame my feet were still too painful to consider wearing boots, but that would come in time. But today, I learned a very important lesson. Always make sure you have your keys when you go out. I stood up, removed my jacket, and then slouched back down in the chair. The encounter with the builders came back to mind. How did they know? Why did they realize I wasn't a woman? What had I done or not done that made it so obvious? Others either hadn't seemed to notice or were too polite to say anything. What was missing? I had to find out, but how? Every promise made in the heat of the moment, praying for the door to open, was forgotten as I reminisced about the excitement of the first part of my outing. I even began to think about what I would wear in the evening and the rest of the afternoon. The day's excitement had been so exhilarating that I was tempted to try it again. Maybe I would tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.